on the Vince Everett Ellison show. There's always been this whisper in the black community about were things better under segregation. Yeah, I heard a lot of old black people talk about that, but we're going to explore that question today on the Vince Everett Ellison show. All right, let's get this thing started. You know, there was a book called The Spiral of Silence. It's an interesting book. It talked about a political question. It said that if the population believes something, the majority of the population believes something, if you ask a person who believes opposite of what the majority population is perceived to believe, will that person tell the truth or will that person go with the majority population? Because the majority population has ways of punishing people for not falling in line and doing what they're told to do. They explored this question when it came to Nazi Germany. A lot of the German people didn't believe in killing Jews and putting them in ovens. They didn't believe in that. But because of the population and the majority of the population they perceived, they thought that they believed in it, they went along with it. And afterward, when asked about it, they said, yeah, we knew this was wrong. It was the same thing that happened down south during Jim Crow. There were a lot of white people that knew that what the Ku Klux Klan was doing and what everybody was doing to black people were wrong. But when asked about it, they basically would go along with the crowd. It's like a mob mentality. And it is pervasive in culture and in politics. Most people are afraid to stand alone and say, this is wrong. Most people are afraid. This comes to the question that I'm getting ready to ask. I've heard so many old black people over 70, around 80, and I heard it when I was growing up as a boy, that would always whisper and say things were better under segregation than it was under integration. And I would always say, that's interesting. And I was always amazed at why you won't say this out loud. Why do you have to whisper it? You know why? Because the black intelligentsia and the powers that be had the ability to punish you if you did. Even now, in South Africa right now, you'll have some of the older South Africans who, they cried for the end of apartheid, they cried for Nelson Mandela getting out of jail, and they cried for the ANC to get power, and now the older South Africans will say, and you can Google it if you like, they will say things were better under apartheid. Why? Because the ANC is a communist organization. They don't know anything about running the government. They go by emotion. They don't go by economics and fact. The same as the black community here in America. Everything is emotional. It's not based upon economics. It's not based upon fact. It's based upon stupidity and how I feel. People never ask you in the black community what you think. They ask you, how you feel, man? How you feel about this? Feelings, not logic, not thought. Case in point. Saw this thing on the news the other day. This little black guy, Pearson, he was a state rep out of Memphis, Tennessee, right? He was angry last year because they were trying to get some type of gun bill passed in the state of Tennessee to keep guns out of the hands of people. And the state of Tennessee, of course, is a very conservative state, except for Memphis. This little group, the city where most black people live in the whole state. And these guys, one from Nashville and one from Memphis, they led a protest on the House floor. Well, they don't know how to do anything else. The black Democrats know how to protest. And so they got expunged from the Senate. Well, of course, they got reelected to the Senate, so they haven't stopped. So and this is a sad story, Pearson, out of Memphis, his brother committed suicide on December 1st, 2024. And, that's terrible. It's sad. Nobody wishes that on anyone. And his family and he has my condolences based upon that very, very tragic event. But then he comes to the House and he puts up a bill and he wants to have, because of his brother's suicide, he wants to have the right to carry in Tennessee without a license revoked. And he brings the bill up before the Tennessee House. And the majority leader, I think his name is Farmer, basically told him, no, we're not going to hear it. Sorry about your brother dying. Sorry about your brother committing suicide. But one has nothing to do with the other. And this is where the emotion comes in. This guy gets so mad, he rushes the guy on the House floor and acts like, and they had to hold him back. You want to fight.
I made sure that he was taken care of, even in death. That's what I've been doing. But also, not just that, I went to all of my nephew's schools. I met with their principals and their teachers to ensure that they are okay. I gave them and made sure that they had grief counseling and that they're seeing a psychiatrist. That's what I've been doing. And while you're talking about hard work, you need to realize that our job is not just in this state house with these marble floors. Our jobs are on the streets and in the communities that we serve. And so while you've been here passing bills that have been hurting transgender children, while you've been here passing bills that have been hurting the poor, hurting the marginalized, hurting the disenfranchised, while you've been here passing bills that have not ended poverty, while you've been here passing bills that have not helped people who need Medicaid expansion, while you've been here doing the hard work of making sure that our state is not the state that it can be, because you have decided.
Representative Pearson.
Reality of our situation is only to be.
Representative Pearson.
While you've been here doing that, I've been in my community.
Representative Pearson.
Meeting with young people, going to school.
A few moments later.
Mr. Chairman, you have 2 ayes, 7 nays.
The noes prevail. House Bill 1392 fails.
No. No, sir.
5-minute recess.
And so this is when it gets personal with me. You know, okay, I can understand you're upset, but here you're caught up in your feelings again. You're not acting like a man. I'm sorry that your brother took his own life, but your brother took his life. That's got nothing to do with my father in Tennessee or my sisters and brothers that live in Tennessee that believe they have a right to defend themselves. Whatever the reasons for your brother taking his life was his reason. That's got nothing to do with everybody else in the state of Tennessee. It's got nothing to do with my father living out in a rural area. He has a right to defend himself. Or my sister living in Memphis having the right to defend herself. Or my brother living in Memphis having the right to defend himself against all them crazy hoodlums running around there shooting and fighting all the time. Police can't be everywhere at once. So he gets mad, want to start fighting on the House floor. You know why? Caught up in their feelings. So now when we get back to this concept of whether segregation was better than forced integration, let's make one thing perfectly clear. I know what y'all saying already. Vince Ellison up there talking about he wants to segregate America again. He want to bring back Jim Crow law. He want to bring back a separate water fountain and separate bathroom and all that stuff. That's a lie. That is a lie. The government of the United States of America should be colorblind. You Democrats are the one that want DEI. You want to put color on everything. I mean, you come, you're going. You come, you're going. You come, you're going. Nobody know what you want. You want to fund HBCUs, but then get mad when you can't get quotas at Harvard. Are white folks asking for quotas at Morehouse? Or at Spelman or at Howard? No, but you get mad when you can't get quotas at Morehouse. You made the Oscars put in an affirmative action program where you can't be even looked upon to get an Oscar if you don't have a minority, LGBTQ, or disabled person in the film. Yeah, got to have it. If you don't have it, they won't even consider you for an Oscar. Affirmative action program at the Oscars will be considered for an Oscar, especially Best Picture. That's people crazy, man. But do white folks ask for the same thing at the NAACP Image Awards? No, they don't. Or the BET Awards? No, they don't. They don't. You know why? Because they don't give a damn if they get one of them sorry awards or not. Oh, but you got black folks fiending for an Oscar. This is why white folks beat you all the time. They're going to earn it. And the reason you're at the bottom is you're going to always beg for it. And everybody hates a beggar. I respect the thief more than I respect a beggar. And the majority of all you DEI, affirmative action, systemic racism Negroes, that's all you are a bunch of beggars, and nobody in the world respects you. All they do is pity you. And they can only pity you for a little while. And the pity is just about to run out. So back to whether segregation was okay or not. This all started with Brown versus Board of Education. Well, it really started with Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson. Yeah, Plessy versus Ferguson. Homer Plessy was a very light-skinned black man. Lived in Louisiana. They wanted to see whether the segregation laws would stand up in the courts. So they had these separate cars on trains for black and white passengers. Well, Homer Plessy went, because he was light-skinned, he went and sat in the white section and nobody bothered him. And then when he told the conductor he was black, the conductor told him to go to the colored part. He wouldn't do it. They arrested Homer. It was all a setup to get to the courts. They paid his bail. They went to the Supreme Court. And Plessy versus Ferguson is infamous because it set up the standard of separate but equal. But Plessy versus Ferguson is interesting. It's interesting because a lot of people try to say that Brown was the good decision, that Plessy was the bad decision. If you read the Cliff Notes from history, that's what it entails. But as I've always told you, history is lies agreed upon. I'm going to read to you what Plessy versus Ferguson said. And Plessy versus Ferguson actually says that black people are not inferior to white people. It actually says that in Supreme Court law. Let me read it to you. This is coming from my book, The Iron Triangle. I'm going to read to you what the Supreme Court said about Plessy versus Ferguson out of the Iron Triangle. All right? Plessy versus Ferguson was in 1896. Okay, this is what it says. Supreme Court is talking here. Justice Brown, this is the Plessy opinion. He said, we consider the underlying fallacy of the plaintiff's argument to consist in the assumption that the enforced separation of the two races stamps the colored race with a badge of inferiority. So he's saying, you are saying that if we separate the two races, it's going to stamp the colored race with a badge of inferiority. He says, we're going to talk about that. If this be so, it is not by reason of anything found in the act, but solely because colored race chooses to put that construction upon it. He said, so if black people feel inferior because of this Supreme Court decision, it is not because of this decision. It's because black people have decided, they decided, not this court, to become inferior. The argument necessarily assumes that if, as has been more than once the case, and is not unlikely to be again, the colored race should become the dominant power in the state legislature and should enact a law precisely in precisely similar terms. It would thereby relegate the white race to the inferior position. So he's saying, back in the days of Reconstruction, a lot of black people had control of state legislatures down south. Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana. Supreme Court is saying that it has been in the past in the South a situation where black people were the superior race in the state legislatures. And if they set up a separate but equal system, the question is, would white people feel inferior to black people? That's the question. They said, so if black people, when they had power, if they had done this, do you think white folks would have felt inferior to black folks? That's the question. He said, we imagine that the white race at least would not acquiesce in this assumption. He said, hell no, white folks wouldn't have felt inferior to black people if black people set up a separate but equal system. They wouldn't have. They wouldn't have acquiesced themselves to that position. The argument also assumes that social prejudices may be overcome by legislation and that equal rights cannot be secured to the Negro except by enforced commingling of the two races. He says, so, you guys are also arguing that the only way for black and white people to secure equal rights and that social prejudices be overcome is with legislation, for us passing laws. That's what you assume. This is what the court says. We cannot accept this proposition. And I will be daggum if they're not right. (1896), 1996, 100 years. 2025, 129 years. And we still fighting over the same thing because legislation couldn't fix it. Exactly what the Supreme Court said. A legislation cannot fix this problem. And then it says, if the two races are to meet on terms of social equality, it must be the result of a natural affinity, a mutual appreciation of each other's merits, and a voluntary consent of individuals. Legislation is powerless to eradicate racial instincts, to abolish distinctions based upon physical differences, and the attempt to do so can only result in accentuating the difficulties of the present situations. Well, I tell you what, that Supreme Court had a whole lot of sense, because all it's done is cause Black Lives Matter, NAACP, bunch of lying Democrats go out here, and right now America is one of the most unhappiest countries in the world. You know why? Because they keep this racial division going, because they want to pass more legislation, not less, more, to try to force people to get along. And the Supreme Court said back with Plessy, this cannot be done. The people got to get to know each other. They got to learn to live with each other. They got to learn to live in happiness, and the government cannot make them do that. And then it ends with this. If the civil and political rights of both races be equal, one cannot be inferior to the other, civilly or politically. Now, did you hear what Plessy said? Let me read that to y'all again, because y'all been told that Plessy versus Ferguson was a racist piece of legislation. That's what you've been told. Let me read it to you again. If the civil and political rights of both races be equal, one cannot be inferior to the other, civilly or politically. I thought this was a racist piece of legislation. If the civil and political rights of both races be equal, one cannot be inferior to the other, civilly or politically. If one race be inferior to the other socially, the Constitution of the United States of America cannot put them upon the same plane. That's right. And since we are not inferior, since no one is superior to the other, the Constitution has no power to make me inferior or superior. That's Plessy. So now let's go to Brown. Brown was used to force integration upon America. The argument was black schools down south and in most places in America were unequal to white schools, and they were out of compliance with Plessy. Plessy said if both of the facilities are equal, what's the problem? Well, black folks said both of those facilities are not equal, and they weren't. The state governments of these states were not giving black schools the same amount of money and paying black teachers the same amount of money as white schools. That was correct. So, when NAACP filed the lawsuit, the schools down south and all the schools in America started saying, we got to get in compliance here. That means these schools have got to be equal. Now, I saw this in real time because my mother and father were in high school during the time of Plessy versus Ferguson. My father went to, they built a brand new school in Haywood County called Carver High School, named after George Washington Carver. It was a black school. That school still stands right now. It's been renovated, and my father's name is on the floor of the basketball court of Carver High School because that's how much the people in Haywood County appreciate and love him. It was dedicated to him. My mother's school is called West High School. It was in Madison County, Tennessee. My mother went there, and all of her siblings went there. The school still stands. I think they've made a police department or sheriff's department out of it now. But that school was there, probably till about 10 years ago, still turning out children, still turning out students. If these schools were so terrible and so raggedy, why are they still standing 50, 60 years later in these rural areas, still operational? Because they weren't. They weren't raggedy, y'all. The South got into compliance, and all of these schools around the nation got into compliance with Plessy. Now, you going to tell me I'm lying. I know what y'all saying. VinceEverettEllison, VinceEverettEllison, all them schools down south were terrible. Black children didn't have nothing. Black children, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All right. Since you're saying that, you call me a lie, I'm going to read Brown versus Board of Education to you. Well, Brown versus Board of Education says that the schools were in compliance, that these schools were equal. You ready? Sit down and listen now. I'm reading from the Iron Triangle again. To expel the myth that the Brown case was decided to increase black student achievement, equalize buildings, curricular qualifications, and salaries of teachers, one need only to read Chief Justice Earl Warren's opinion. In it, he stated, and this is Earl Warren, in the instant cases, the question is directly presented. Here, unlike Sweat versus Painter, Sweat versus Painter was this black guy wanted to go to law school. The law school that would take him was an inferior law school, and NAACP proved it. So the University of Texas, I believe, had to allow him to go to school there. But they proved that the law school that he had applied to, and I think it was the HBCU, was an inferior law school. They proved it. And so they had to let him go to the University of Texas. And I think this case, and this was Sweat versus Painter, okay? So they said, here, unlike Sweat versus Painter, because in Sweat versus Painter, they proved that the other school was inferior. Here, unlike Sweat versus Painter, there are findings that the Negro and white schools involved have been equalized. Oh, Lord. Here, unlike Sweat versus Painter, there are findings below that the Negro and white schools involved have been equalized and are being equalized with respect to buildings, curricula, qualifications, and salaries of teachers and other tangible factors in the Negro and white schools involved in each of the cases. We must look instead to the effect of segregation itself on public education. Now, just in case you didn't hear me, let me explain this to you in layman's terms. It is saying that right now, while the Supreme Court is hearing this case, the schools down south are being equalized, are equalized. So all this mess about separate but equal and that the schools are terrible is a lie, y'all. I'm reading it from the Supreme Court case. It makes me so angry to read this to y'all. Y'all be like a drunk looking to come like a. And you can go out there and still argue that Brown versus Board of Education was a great Supreme Court decision. So, right, okay. So, this is what Chief Justice Warren wrote. So, we got to deal with the effects of segregation. So, he said we got to deal with what effects separating black children have on black children. What are the effects of it? Because the buildings and everything are straight. They straight. So, let's put a pen in that. So now we got to look at what segregation does to black children. Here it is. Here's the kicker. This is the slam dunk at the end of the game to win it. This is the three-point shot with 0-0 on the clock to win the basketball game, okay? This is all of it. This is what the United States government believes about black people in 1956 with Brown versus Board of Education, and they still believe it now. Here it is. We come then to the question presented. Colon, does segregation of children in public education solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities and other tangible factors may be equal, and they say again they're equal, deprive the children of the minority group, which is black children, equal opportunities? That's the question. That's the question. Here's the answer. We believe it does. Now, Supreme Court, you believe it does? Tell me how you believe it does. This is how it believes it. Everybody paying attention? To separate them, that means black children, from others of similar age and qualifications, solely because of their race. Guess what it does to them, y'all? It generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely ever to be undone. And here's the kicker. Segregation of white and colored children in public schools has a detrimental effect upon colored children. Didn't I blow your mind this time? To separate them from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority. You feel inferior because you can't sit by the toilet, sit on the toilet beside him, because you can't go to school with him, because you can't eat on the lunch counter. You feel inferior. Separation of white and colored children in public schools has a detrimental effect upon the colored children. Don't have no detrimental effect on the white children. You feel better about yourself when you're beside the white children. Man, y'all ought to be ashamed of yourself to celebrate such terrible things as this. Me and even ex-Kennedy don't agree on a whole lot, but we agree on that. We agree that Brown was a racist piece of legislation. Oh, and black folks want to celebrate it in March. I mean, them greasy preachers and all of them they got movies about Brown. They got Larry Fishburne playing Thurgood Marshall on a Broadway play about Brown. I mean, Brown. And it was Plessy that said you weren't inferior. It was Plessy. He said, Plessy says that we consider the underlying fallacy of the plaintiff's argument. He says a fallacy to consist in his assumption that the enforced separation of the two races stamped the colored race with a badge of inferiority. They say it's a fallacy that separating black children from white children causes inferiority. And then Brown says segregation of white and colored children in public schools has a detrimental effect upon the colored children and generates a feeling of inferiority. Now, which one is a racist Supreme Court case and which one is not? One says you're inferior, one says you're not. Wow. Plessy says, if this be so, it is only by reason of If this be so, it is not by reason of anything found in the act. This act did not say black people were inferior, but solely because the colored race chooses to put that construction upon it. You choose to be inferior. There you go. You choose it. Yeah, you do. So now, with that, the civil rights movement comes out. And they go, yeah, we inferior. And the only way we're going to feel good about ourselves is to be around white folk. So we're going to have to pass laws, and we're going to have to do all this other stuff to force white people and us around them, because when we get around white people, we're going to feel better about ourselves. I guess it's like Superman, when that kryptonite hit him, and the only way he can get his power back is lay in the sun, let the sun hit him. And the son just make him feel so much better about himself. So I guess they've been around white folks. I remember seeing that picture of Dr. King on the bus sitting beside the white man, just feeling good about himself. Because if there had been a black man sitting beside him, he'd been mad about it. I'm saying about no black. But a white man sitting beside him, he's just, man, you know what? That's a sick mentality. And that's why we still at the bottom of everything. And you got white folks looking at us saying, I don't even understand y'all. Why y'all keep fighting for this stuff? Because I don't. I mean, I really know myself, and I ain't all that where you got to be fighting and killing to try to sit beside me on the bus. I'm just, you know. I mean, I told the story. I was riding with my daughter. I'm riding in my Cadillac Escalade. It's about a $105,000 car. I'm dressed up in one of them suits like I usually wear. Taking my daughter to private school that she's going to. Life is good for VinceEverettEllison. I look over, and I see a white guy. He had Confederate flags all over his car. Car looked like it's about to fall apart, smoking. I look at him, it looked like he ain't been to the dentist in his life, just teeth all rotten. Looked like a meth head. You know, looked like he broke, smoking a cigarette, bent all over, cap on his head, hair straggling, hadn't shaved. I looked over at him, and I told my daughter, and that's what the NAACP and the Black Caucus tell me that I want to be trying to fight to be equal to. Just because he's a white man. I'm supposed to be fighting and sit on the toilet beside him. Gonna pass a law to forcibly make him spend time with me. Never me. Stupidest thing I ever heard of in my life. So what do you for? So they started busing. Man, they started people fighting all over America about busing. In Boston, and, man, the northern cities were real bad. Chicago, man, they burning up buses, fighting in the street, integrating the schools. Oh, it was horrible. You know, but just forcing restaurants, and black folks want to go eat in restaurants of racists that told them they don't want them in there. And, you know, I asked my daddy about it growing up and asked him why did he ever go to any of the white restaurants that were, you know, after they were integrated. He said, man, you don't want to go to them people's restaurant. You don't want nobody cooking food for you that hate you. And that made so much sense to me. Just a binary concept. You don't want to eat food, the food of nobody that hates you. I mean, if you made your wife mad that night, you better not let her cook you dinner, because, you know, gonna slap her head. I want to cook me some dinner. That's not very wise. So I used to hear about these racist restaurants having a pile of barbecue for their white constituents and a pile of barbecue for their black constituents. And black folks just in there eating the barbecue, they done spit in it and defecated in it and everything. And they just, well, I guess in their minds, it's a defecation of white folks. It's okay. If you told them, hey, you know, man, there's a feces in that thing. Is it white man's feces? Yeah, well, I'll eat it. It's just so stupid. You know, there's urine in that Coke. Is it white man's urine? Yeah, well, I'll drink it. So, so you know, I sat back and I listened to my father talk about before the forced integration, how great the schools were in the black community. He said it, not me. First day when I went to school, it was interesting because I was in Haywood County, Tennessee. Haywood County is about 50, 60 miles from Memphis. Martin Luther King Jr. got killed. The first year that I went to school, King got killed in April of '68. I started Head Start, and I believe I'm correct here. It had to be '68 because it was Head Start. So, and I think that was the first integrated class in Haywood County. Anyway, we had a bus driver. And I talked to my sister about it yesterday, Virginia, to make sure I had this right. His name was Albert Smith. And Albert Smith was a white man. He was good. Albert Smith didn't do me any harm when I was growing up. He wasn't mean. He wasn't racist toward me in any way that I saw. But we rode this bus, and the bus picked up black and white children. And this is interesting. Albert Smith had a imaginary line in his bus where he put the white children in the back of the bus. The white children sat in the back of Albert Smith's bus. And he had the black children standing in the front. And he had an imaginary line that black children could not cross to go to the back of that bus. If you went too far back, he said, hey, honey, come on back up and sit down. And you sat up in the front. And we started understanding what this was. He didn't want us together because he didn't want no trouble on his bus. But this is how smart he was. He didn't put the white kids in front of the bus. He put the black kids in front of the bus. Because he knew that if he had put those black kids in the back of that bus, NAACP them would have come and burned the whole damn county down. He put the white kids in the back of the bus and nobody cared. And those white children did not say one mumbling word, nor did the white people in Haywood County say one mumbling word about sitting in the back of that bus because it didn't matter to them. And you want to know why they rule the world? Crap like that does not matter. How you feel about most of them, liberals now are different. But how you feel about most of them now, they're going to do that. If you hate them, you hate them. That's your problem. That's kind of how I am. If you dislike me, that's your problem. You put your hands on me, you have another. You don't like me, I don't care. I'm not going to leave any sleep whatsoever over it. I'm going to treat you kindly. I'm going to treat you with respect. You're not going to have a real reason not to dislike me. If you don't dislike me, it'll be something artificial. If you don't like me because I tell the truth, that's your problem. If you don't like me because I'm black, that's your problem. If you don't like me because I've written 4 best-selling books, that is your problem. If you don't like me because I'm happy and God is good to me and I don't look at myself as oppressed and I don't see anybody that's superior to me, that is your problem. But I'm going to love you. So Albert Smith figured it out. Black folks caught up in their feeling. Bus going to the same place. White folks say, yeah. Well, white folks go to the back, sure. Bus going to the school, yeah, I don't care what they said. Black folks, but don't put my child in the back. Don't put my child in the back of the bus. Well, that's one set them in the front. All right then, I feel good about myself. See, feelings of inferiority. Not that you are, feeling that you are. Feeling that you are. Just like that young man I talked about in Tennessee got caught up in his feelings. Want to fight on the house floor. First thing a black community want to do when they get power is give up the gun. You know why? Because they don't want white folks to have them. Not that they'll defend themselves. They don't want white folks to be able to defend theirs. So they want to take guns from everybody because to take away from everybody means take away from white folks too. So instead of being a man and defending yourself, you want to take away from somebody else so they can't defend themselves. And this is what this little dude was trying to do. Take people's guns, not telling black people to take your guns and defend yourself, but let's take these guns away from everybody so that they have to bow to government. And then they have to depend only on police to come and deal with these problems. And that's not what we do as Americans, y'all. So most black people, and I believe most white people down south, didn't want forced integration. They wanted desegregation. What was desegregation? Very simple. If you wanted black people, the laws on the book that separated black and white people no longer exist. They no longer exist. They're white clean. If a private business says that I don't want blacks in my place, please let me know. Because I don't want to be nowhere that I'm not wanted. And I damn sure don't want to give you my money if you don't want me in your place. Let me know. And then the people that want it, black and white, to come into their places, they can do it. Watch them other suckers go bankrupt. They'll change that real quick. That's desegregation. I'm not going to make you do it. I don't care if you do it. I don't. Man, I tell you what, I promise to God. I don't want to eat at a racist establishment. I don't want to work for a racist. I would like to know if you're going to say no blacks allowed. Please let me know. Please let me know. Do you think I'm going to march and raise hell to try to go eat at an establishment that don't want me there? Ah, man, please let me know. So let me know and I'm out the door. Instead, you got black folks fighting to go eat at a restaurant that calls them the N-word. They call them coon. Please take my money, sir, please. And that's why you got no respect, man. None. DEI, still trying to force companies to take them in that don't want them. Affirmative action, same thing. Don't want to earn your way in like they did in the NBA and the National Football League. No, beg your way in. Segregation? No. Forced integration? No. Desegregation? The right way. That's the standard for America. That's what we fight for. For every American who wants to come together, be able to come together. The people that want to stay apart because I want no parts of you either. It's a sick mind wants to be somewhere that they're not wanted. It's Muhammad Ali, and I agree. Sick mind. And my mind is not sick. So if all y'all gonna go there and lie on me, say Vince Ellison is a segregationist, I'm gonna call you a liar until you go to hell because you know you're lying. I believe that as free men and women, we should be allowed, we should go anywhere we want to go. But also as free men and women and image bearers of God, we shouldn't want to go anywhere that we're not wanted. Shouldn't want to go anywhere that we're not wanted. So, to all y'all out there looking at me, if you don't want me somewhere around you, all you have to do is whisper in my ear, Vince, you're not wanted here. And I'm saying, peace out, bro. I'm gone. Get your manhood back. Get your womanhood back. Understand that you're a child of God. Based on that, you cannot be oppressed. All of you that's accepting him, understand that you're his child. You cannot be oppressed. All of you, understand that you've been adopted into his family. You cannot be oppressed. No man has the power. None. So all this foolishness about segregation, all this foolishness about forced integration, don't worry about it. Stand strong. Live on your merit. Live on what you earn. Nobody can take it from you. And until then, always remember that I am here to wake you up. I hope I did you some good today. So please join me again for another edition of the Vince Everett Ellison Show. All right, friends, Vince Everett Ellison is here. I want you to go to my website. And on my website, you're going to see a lot of great stuff, man. You're going to see that we got t-shirts, we got caps. You got my books, my documentaries. You got all kinds of stuff on VinceSpeaksTruth.com. Go there. We're dropping new t-shirts. We're dropping new merchandise. My new book, The End of Tolerance, is there. The End of Tolerance. Make sure you get it. Make it #1. If you got my first 3, get The End of Tolerance. It's just as good. And it's telling us we have to end our tolerance with these leftists, these Democrats. We can no longer allow them to sexually groom our children. We can no longer allow them to castrate little boys and call them little girls, run God out of the public square, take away our guns, take away our sovereignty. No longer allow it. So go on VinceSpeaksTruth.com. That is VinceSpeaksTruth.com. Hit merchandise. You'll see the t-shirts. You'll see the caps. You'll see the books. You'll see the documentaries. You'll see it all. And let's keep this ball rolling. God bless you.